ready for the next session. We have Zara on stage with a talk on news and networks. Please welcome Zara.
Hello, everybody. I'm talking about news and networks. It was a bit of a home botched together project, so I've tried to reflect that in my slides with my 90s word art. My name's Zara Siddique. I recently graduated from Cardiff Uni with a first in computer science and maths. I'm now working for a political party called Renew, scrolling across the screen now. I got to mention them because they let me take a lot of time off work to be here, and their website should also scroll across the screen soon. So you should check them out. They're really cool. So the TLDR version of this talk, so I got some RSS feeds, I converted them into JSON, I wrote some Python, and then I exported some nodes and edges and made a graph of the news which looked like this. So how did I do all that? Mission one was get some data. So I looked at these news websites first. Can I see a show of hands if you regularly read news from one of these sites or places? Yeah, most people in here are familiar with one or more. So the RSS feeds, I had to think about what the best way to get the news was to make this map. And RSS was the first thing that came to mind. I'd used it for a project before. So I did a quick Google search, got an RSS feed. So for the Guardian, you can type in any topic and then /RSS and it will get you a feed. So you can see it says the title and then it has the categories of that article, which I used later on when I was making my little graph. Now that was in XML format, which is not very useful for me, so I used a little thing online called RSS to JSON online converter, and as you can see, it's got all my categories now in a nice listy format that I can use in Python. So that sorted out the Guardian and the New York Times for me, which had a similar format. The problem with the Sun was that I didn't have enough data from their RSS feed. They only gave you a few stories, so I had to figure out a way to solve this. I thought, well, this little online converter thing has an API call, so if I could just hit that up every day, that'd be good. I had absolutely no idea how to do that, but I'd used Postman before for testing out my APIs, and they had this thing called monitoring, which will test your API every day. And I just, like a kind of hacky way, just told it to log the response. So they don't usually do that. They just tell you whether it was successful or a fail. I got it to log the response too, so I had my data going every day. You can see it runs every day at 11 p.m. All those red bars are when I was trying to figure out how to get it to work. At the bottom here, you can see September 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th. You can also see how late I did the work for this talk for. Yeah, so the last 5 days I've been getting data off the Sun. And then I can use all that and get some data. My final news platform was BBC. When I tried to get the JSON file, there were no categories, which made me very upset because I didn't know what to do. So I thought I can still get all the articles and the data from the articles. So I made a nice list of the links. So I read in the JSON file, created a list of links, and then I used web scraping. So I opened all my links in, I wrote a little function to get the classes, I wrote a little function to clean up all the HTML markers, and this is my web scraping bit. You don't have to understand this code, this is just so you see sort of how much I use. It's not very much. So for every link, it opens the page. Beautiful Soup reads that page for me. It finds the story body class, opens up a file, writes the articles to the file, and eventually I get a nice folder with all my news articles that looks like this. So just to sum up, we got all our data now. So we're going to have a little break from the code now. So you might be wondering why I decided to make a big map of the news. I mean, you might not, but for the purposes of the talk, we'll just pretend you are. So the problem, this is a photo of my family. They're not the problem, but I noticed I was thinking about like why do I really want to do this? I did feel like quite strongly about doing it. So we all have different ways of viewing the world. My mum is a geneticist, so she likes doing stuff about the human body. My dad builds stuff like houses, so his world makes sense from buildings and how they're put together. My brother likes making circuits and stuff, and I like people and the way that people link together, and news and politics, and that's probably why I've ended up working for a political party now. So if anyone was wondering, this is Senna, and he likes the gym. So I'm going to be running sprints. In the sprints tomorrow, I'm going to be working on this project more. My eventual aim is to make sort of a web app that people can put in their own RSS feeds or data or whatever, and it'll get a map like the one I created. So everyone can visualize the news like I can. So back to the code. We've got all our data. Mission 2 was magical data manipulation. So sorting out these categories now. We make a little, we read in the JSON file, make a little list of all the categories. We remove the duplicates in the last bit there. All the code is on, will be on GitHub after this talk, and I'll send a link to the Slack channel. And then the edges, this was really complicated to do, but I've made a list of all the weighted edges. So that was, and then wrote those to CSV files. So that's all ready to go into my networks, my map. And step 3 was natural language processing. So you may remember from the BBC files, we had a whole load of text files with all the content from all my articles, which didn't have categories data. So I wanted to get keywords from those instead. I thought natural language processing sounds like the sort of way you would do that. I didn't know anything about it going in. I studied it a bit at uni, but I had never used it in practice. I found a little package called GenSim, which upon reading some of the docs seemed usable and to do what I wanted it to. The way this works was I read in all my text files as strings. I used a list of stop words, which are just words you don't want to include in your keywords. So you can see when it starts from about, above, after, so all the A words. That was just a list I copied off the internet of common stop words, and then I've added some other ones that came up in my keywords, and I thought those probably shouldn't be there. So some like punctuation-y things. So I've removed all those from being keywords as well. And the second bit removes all the words that only appear once, because they're not going to be keywords, and it helps the whole function thing happen better. So this, lots of text here, but you get a list of all your words with an ID, and GenSim does all this complicated stuff for you. You just say make a dictionary, it makes all your words, and then it creates a vector with how many times those words appear in every document, and that's saved to that bbc.mm file, which is called your corpus. It's a vector form of all your data, and then you can run a model using GenSim. This was just their sort of standard model, just LSI, which is latent semantic analysis. I don't really know what that is yet. I'm trying to figure it out. But if anyone knows more about this, come find me tomorrow and we'll use some better models. And then that got me some keywords, which seemed to be linked to each other. So that was good. It kind of worked. But yeah, you'll see more on that later. Another code break, because that bit is quite heavy for me. So here are some GIFs while I have some water. I really like the penguin one. It's really funny. So, last bit Make a network. I googled it. How do I make pretty networks in Python? And I got this list of things. I did a lot of reading, and it said that network X is the best one in various places. I don't know if that's true, but I couldn't get it to work on my computer, so that was out. And then I tried to use something called GraphTool, and that I spent an hour fiddling around with it, and I couldn't get that to work either. So eventually I used something called GraphViz, and then this is all my code for that. So at the start you set all your things. You want light blue, you want your nodes to be that size, and etc. Read in my nodes, add my nodes, read in my edges, add my edges, and then output a nice graph for me, which looked like this, which you might be thinking is not the pretty thing I showed you at the start. It's because I didn't end up using GraphViz, obviously, because it's not very nice. Eventually I ended up using some software I'd used before called Gephi to make this pretty graph. So you can just import spreadsheet up here, put in all your nodes, import spreadsheet again, put in all your edges, which we made earlier, and then in software looks like this. You can run all sorts of things, make pretty colours, set them by modularity classes, which is kind of separating communities of words, or in terms of a network it's just strong communities, topics that have a lot of links within each other, which I found really interesting because it did separate things into very distinct categories for me that were understandable to me. And then I made a map. Okay. So what do we gain from all this? So these are all the maps I made. You can clap now because I did a good job. Let's look at some of them. Does anyone have a particular preference of what one they want to look at?
You're taking questions now?
Oh, is it question time?
No, I'm asking you.
Oh, no. We'll look at one map and then we'll do questions.
The sun.
The sun? Okay. That's the worst one, but I knew everyone was going to say it. Okay. This is the sun. So, can I zoom in still? Yeah. So, let's try and figure out what the things are. So, apparently explainers is the biggest topic in the sun, and TV and showbiz. That's the things they most commonly report on. So they've got this little blue bit here, which is news. This purple bit, I'm assuming is sport. Yep. And then the little tech bit at the bottom, which is completely unconnected to everything else, but has I've only used news from the last week, so there's a lot of stuff about iPhones and Apple in the news, so you can see that there. Now I did want to talk more about the comparison between different news networks and things, but all my graphs turned out so different to each other because of the way that the different news sites reported. It became kind of difficult to do that. So it's something I'd like to work on tomorrow and maybe talk about next year as well. So this is my map. Enjoy. And I'm ready to take questions now.
Thank you very much for your talk. Could you say perhaps what you expect to see or what you expected to see and what you did?
Yeah, so I think, so I usually read The Guardian, so I kind of, what I saw in that map I understood from what they reported, but I think the more interesting thing was when I looked at newspapers, for example, New York Times I never look at, but how like US-centric it was, and then I sort of went back and looked at our news and saw how UK-centric it was. And and kind of the different areas of importance for different newspapers. So I think the main thing was just, wait, what was the question again? Just what did I expect to see and what I actually saw? Yeah, so for the ones I read, it was what I expected. For the ones I didn't read, I got a whole new view of what they might be about, basically. Yeah.
Let's try again. Yeah.
Hello. Is this, having done this, is it going to affect what news you read and how you consume the news?
Ooh. I think I feel like I have more of an understanding of what the main areas that people report on, and like looking at this for loads of different papers, I think the main 4 topics were always UK news, world news, sport, culture, and I only look at UK news, so I was like, wow, there are 3 big areas I'm completely missing out on. But not entirely. I just did it because I thought it'd be nice to figure out what those big chunks that people report on are.
Thank you.
I just wondered if there were any additional characteristics that you would
Ooh. No, and I actually hadn't thought of doing that, but that does sound very cool, and I might have a look at that tomorrow and work on it. Yeah, thank you.
It's very interesting. I guess you must have put together over last week.
Pretty much.
I wondered if you've actually looked at the historical data, because you can see from the Sun, for instance, very briefly from the image, that a lot of the Sun's time is taken up with fashion and with celebrity. Those are things that stand out as clusters. If we were able to go back in time and look at what's happening in the Sun around Brexit and votes, and in all the other places, that'd be very interesting. Have you got any ideas about that?
Yeah. So the way I got the data with the RSS feeds meant I could only get the most recent data. But now that I've kind of figured out how to store that, from now on we'll be able to look at historical data. There is something just called News API, very aptly named, that lets you get historical data, but it wasn't quite in the format I wanted, and it didn't give me the category data that I needed. But I'm sure it does exist out there somewhere. I just need to look a bit harder to find it, I think. But I agree, that would be really interesting. And I did, so I started this project before I got a job in June, and I was able to compare The Guardian from June to September, and you could notice significant differences. For example, in the US news thing, a lot of what was being reported in June was about Donald Trump and North Korea, and now it's about Donald Trump and Russia. So we moved on to different arguments. Yeah.
Is this project part of your regular job?
It's not. I do, so my job is a developer, but I do sort of work next to the ads and marketing people. So when I first started doing it, it was interesting to be able to say, well, oh, did you know this is actually really popular at the moment and this is being reported on a lot. Maybe you should have a look at that, and also to look at key people that had come up and that suddenly became significant. So it's not part of my job at all, but it kind of helps. I can have an extra tidbit or two to tell them from this project.
One more time.